Well, folks, thanks for joining us again today and joining the increasing number of people in Canada and the US and even some internationally that are tuning into the day-to-day Stockwell Day, giving you insights and the big items on the news each day and trying to collate some of the stuff so that you don't have to spend so much time just browsing around your various networks. If this is helpful to you, and we're finding that people say it is, so thanks for tuning in. We're going to look at some pretty significant announcements here today, and then end up with some trends, especially among millennials and Gen Z, that is not that positive. We'll end up with a positive note though, so hang on. The big announcement, much waited for news in Canada, has been the announcement and a grandiose display from the federal government, Prime Minister Carney, supposedly breakthrough announcement in terms of backing off of some of the environmental restrictions imposed by the United Nations and other groups. Those restrictions increasingly finding to be unscientific and not helping the environment at all. All they're doing is impoverishing countries that need more energy. Anyway, having said that, so what the Prime Minister Carney has announced is that yes, the second pipeline project is going to be approved, and that has sent all kinds of shockwaves back and forth across the country and even into the U.S. We saw his, Prime Minister Carney's former environment minister, the Greenpeace activist, extremist on the environmental side, Monsieur Guilbeault, has actually resigned. He was moved out of the environment portfolio some time ago and was given another portfolio, but he has quit. He said he just cannot support the government supposedly abandoning the climate restrictions that he wanted to see and the carbon restrictions he wanted to see. But as the smoke begins to clear, if I can use that metaphor, and the dust begins to settle from the announcement, we see, in fact, the federal government, in terms of saying to Alberta, okay, we're going to go ahead and approve a pipeline, they are requiring Alberta to bring in some increased industrial carbon taxing measures. And there are other restrictions in place. It's going to be a few years, maybe several years, before we even see significant activity on the construction side. The Premier of British Columbia, Premier Eby, is almost saying over my dead body in terms of the tanker ban being lifted. So big announcement and much applauded at the start. The applause we've noticed even during the day now, and you're going to see it, I think, continue to go down. Some excitement then, but my prediction is, and unfortunately, and I say unfortunately, some of these things that I'm predicting based not on any particular extra area of insight on my part, but I do have learned over the years how to scan the various signs and signals out there and read the tea leaves, as we might say. I think what we're going to see, unfortunately, is continued growth in the U.S. in terms of energy development, in terms of U.S. natural gas, liquid natural gas, and refined energy products going around the world. And Canada, which should be the world leader in all this, benefiting prosperity at home and lowering emissions abroad with refined oil and gas products. I think Canada is going to not get the surge that we had been hoping for. And in the U.S., you're going to see that move ahead. Now, I hope I'm wrong. Let's watch for it. But there are considerable roadblocks in the way. And this is in a time and an era where over the last few years, some of the major proponents of these environmental restrictions from the UN and the Paris Agreement and these various accords, they've actually backed away from it. Some of the world leaders of advancing and pursuing alternate forms of energy are realizing that, in fact, because of science and technology, many of the oil and gas products are now refined in better ways than they ever were before. And so you're not seeing the increase in carbon emissions. And since they're relying on true science and not on Greta Thunberg type of science, they're backing away from some of those and allowing energy production to increase with an ability to have extra refined products in the process. That's why I'm concerned the announcement is going to start fading into reality, and Canada will not get in the long term the type of prosperity and growth we wanted to see across our country, and also for First Nations group. And keep in mind that you continue to hear about, they say, you know, quote, First Nations are opposed to a pipeline. First Nations are opposed to a lift on the tanker ban. Mainstream media rarely qualifies this. Many First Nations group are in fact in favor of these projects. They know the prosperity it can bring to their own groups, to their own young people, and they are convinced that this can be done in a way where in fact carbon emissions are not causing the so-called climate change that we thought. So keep that in mind when you hear about First Nations groups opposing something. Some are and many are not. That's what I believe is going to be the effect overall. What that means then, if we continue to stay, if Canada continues to stay into a growth of somewhat a diminished pattern in terms of the economics, that means there's going to be more and more issues raised about affordability, about people being able to afford, whether it's groceries, whether it's first-time homeowners, whatever it might be. So what does government do then when it's under pressure and people are upset about their economic lives? Well, most governments, unfortunately, then cave in to the left-wing leanings, to the socialist leanings among their own group and the pressures from a culturally Marxist mainstream media, and they begin to develop more and more socialist programs, which of course are built on people getting free stuff. And who can argue with the joy of getting free stuff? Now, one thing that's emerging, what governments do is they'll look for other places in the world that are running programs that seem to be successful, and they'll point and they'll say, there, you see that program down there is successful, so we're going to do it up here. And that's why another prediction I'm going to make, you're going to continue to see not just the push for, but the acceptance of basic income guaranteed type of programs. And as we've said before, these in the long run impoverish people. They rob people of incentive to get into the workplace. But what's being looked at now, and it's really starting to come to the fore, you're going to see it more in media, in the area which is known as Cook County in the U.S., as people are looking for examples where basic income guarantees, they say, are working. There's now a network of up to 150 mayors that have joined in with this and have been implementing basic income guarantees actually for some time. Some pre-COVID, it definitely took off during the COVID times when government response to COVID shut down many areas of the economy, restricted work. So again, what does government do? Then they have to give out free money, since people, even if they wanted to, can't work to earn it. And those programs stay. Very difficult in politics, I can tell you folks. Once you start to give people stuff for free, you try and take that away and you listen to the screaming. And what they've got in these 150 counties, 150 municipalities in the so-called Cook County project, they are giving and have been giving absolutely free without any conditions, anywhere from, for single young individuals, $350 a month, all the way up to $3,250 a month, depending on the need, depending on the size of the family. It's just free money, just given out, no questions asked, a basic income guarantee, moving along and progressing. And their work has been handled by and with an entire division within the University of Chicago, which is sort of interesting that they're running this project, monitoring and suggesting ways in which basic income can work. And one of the things that the University of Chicago program is doing, incidentally enough, in consulting with these 150 mayors, is they've polled it and they say it's working. Basic income guarantee is working. It's a raving success. And so people are saying, how do you know it's working? Well, we polled the people. We did a poll of those who are receiving up to $3,000 a month absolutely free with no guarantees. And guess what? It's a 94% acceptance rate, 94% approval rating. Well, folks, who is going to vote against getting free money? Of course, that's going to be the case. But what they have to be held to account for, and this is where legislators have to be very tough on this, they're also recording that work incentive, the incentive to go out and look for a job, decreases. And in spite of the fact that people are getting basic economic income guarantees, overall income levels drop, because many people will not work even if they're getting less money, rather than work to get a little bit more money. So poverty rates increase, the work involvement and incentive to work decreases, and overall it's not a good scene, except for the fact you can get elected on those type of programs. So very concerned about what we're seeing and I think you're going to continue to see the ongoing movement of basic guaranteed income. That's reflected in the election of the mayor in New York City, Mamdani, and of course an avowed communist, if not socialist, very strong socialist, followed by a similar mayor in Seattle. I don't see these, unfortunately, as momentary blips on the economic radar, folks, unless politicians really wake up and start telling the truth on this. I see these types of programs increasing, and people like the University of Chicago, they call it the Inclusive Economy Lab, promoting these type of things. Not a good trend. Well, with all of that, you would think that stress levels would decrease across the population. But in fact, in the United States, and paralleled with similar polls in Canada, now in the US, among 12 to 17-year-olds, 2 million of them, 2 million 12 to 17-year-olds now on full-time antidepressants, on anti-anxiety drugs. So all the promise of less responsibility, you don't have to work, we're going to give you free money, it does not seem to be making people more satisfied and more at peace. This is a real concern as we see more and more people moving to that, and young people being pulled into it. Well, shifting to something a little bit different, but indefinitely will raise anxiety levels. You probably haven't heard of the Russian company called Neri, and a man by the name of Alexander Panov who runs that company. And it's very high-tech stuff he's been doing. Basically what it is the development of bird drones. And so you might be thinking, well, drones that look like birds? No, drones that are birds. This, in fact, is more and more awareness is coming from this. But this particular company has developed the ability to install in the brains of pigeons tiny electronic receptors that can actually cause the bird to fly in a certain direction or to fly for a certain district. There's also a distance. There's also a tiny electronic backpack, if you were, that it's installed on the, very lightweight, obviously, on the back of the bird. And so you can have, what they have right now is pigeons flying. Now, a pigeon can fly up to 300 miles a day, believe it or not. Flocks of pigeons being sent out for observation purposes, and the potential there is for carrying lightweight product, whatever that might be, extremely lightweight. Some of the concern is, you talk about people being worried about the spread of avian flu or bird flu. What an amazing way to do it if you can direct these pigeons, and it's turned out to be not just a project, but it's turned out to be highly successful. And you're going to see the development from this particular company is already talking about using ravens and larger birds. You can carry bigger payloads, and the capability not just for spying, of course, but for spreading all kinds of things is getting pretty high. The other thing that what they're saying is they can send a flock of pigeons into a busy area, maybe a city that's known to have lots of pigeons flying around the water fountains or wherever it may be, and pigeons there with electronic watching and listening devices. So now I don't want to raise the paranoid level, but remember, folks, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. Really, in all seriousness, I hate to use the phrase, always there ought to be a law. I hate the potential and the tendency to just bring in more government legislation. But I think here's an area where legislation should be looked at. Tampering with animal life, tampering with birds in this way. Can it be stopped? I don't know. but it's something that needs to be looked at in a pretty serious way. And so what are young people in that entire generation doing to help the anxiety other than massively taking anxiety drugs? Well, as I talked about before, I said, first on record, if you checked my podcast almost 2 months ago, K-pop, Korean pop culture continues with Demon Hunters, continues to get awards around the world, and that particular development of entertainment and the Demon Hunter visuals now in 93 countries are established as significant cultural phenomenon and continue to get awarded. Put that together with, we've talked about this before, you get episodes and you get productions like Stranger Things, which talk about a little rural town in the U.S. with all kinds of things happening below the surface in very interesting ways, a whole new fantasy world underneath there. Combine that, again, something I talked about over a week ago, romanticides. This is for the slightly older generation, but a real increase in fixation on romantic novels that have a higher degree now of fantasy in the spirit world, the supernatural world, and becoming more and more sexualized. So you can tell me if you think this is a positive direction that things are going. If there is a positive note, just released, there are some stats on Bible sales, the sale of Bibles for 2025. It's up significantly. As a matter of fact, it's up 11%, the sale of Bibles. 18 million Bibles sold just in the U.S. in 2025. And combine that with what's available and being accessed electronically on devices, products like YouVersion and others, which are now talking about in 2025 having had 1 billion views. So is there help on the way? Is there something that can balance out all the anxiety that's out there? Well, reading the Bible is proven to be not a particularly bad thing. Matter of fact, can be a good thing to your health. So let's see what develops in terms of these progressions, folks. Lots of stuff to be thinking about. And thanks for tuning in. We will see you soon.